All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the createTED podcast. I better adjust my screen so you can see me better. Now, I feel like I should have sunglasses on and an earpiece. Um, and
Absolutely.
when you realize who my guest is today, you'll know why. I've got, and Tracy, I forgot to ask you this before I hit record. Is it Traci Hunter Abramson or Traci Abramson?
I answer to both.
Okay. Well, for the
So the
interview,
fronts of my books always say Traci Hunter
okay.
Abramson, but
So I've got Tracy on the podcast today. And you might be, well, let me tell you a little bit about Tracy, and then we'll talk about why I have Tracy on the show today. Tracy is quite a prolific author. Um, she's right now, and I double checked before we started because I want to make sure I got it right. 45 plus novels and novellas, which is amazing. And the way I got introduced to Tracy, and we're going to get to what kind of book she actually writes, is I was at my first Storymakers conference. Trying to think what year it was. Wow. This may have been around like 2008 or 2009, somewhere in there.
I
And
think it was somewhere around.
I was working on a starting like a YA political thriller at the time. And there was a class that talked about said the author had previously worked as an analyst at the CIA. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. Let's go to that. And that's how I met Tracy and got introduced to just her as a writer. And then fast forward years, I got introduced to her books. I decided that, I'm like, I've gone to a lot of Tracy's classes, but I've never read one of her books. So I picked up one and now I can't stop reading them. Um, they are really, really just enjoyable political thrillers. And they've got a good mix of romance in them. And they're just a really, really fun story to where you get sucked in. And I normally, between you and Sarah Eden, I'm in trouble. I read Sheriff Savage Wells for her, and I'm like, wait, because I like Westerns. So I'm like, hold on, wait a minute.
Hmm.
I'm like, I didn't think I was going to enjoy the romance part. I did. And yours at first, I'm like, I don't know. But now I'm like, just cheering everybody on. And it really, really builds into it. So I just really
Well, thank you.
enjoy those. I really do. Um, and now I've got a note here, but and I wanted to throw out there to the audience. If you're going to interview someone who writes spy novels, how do you prepare for that? Well, what did I do today? I had on different things from the latest Mission Impossible soundtrack, enjoyed that, and then I happened to be talking to someone about spy stuff at work today. So that was
There you
fun.
go.
So that gets you going. And yesterday, to prepare, I was listening to the Rest is Classified podcast, which has great stuff on it too. And like I mentioned, I think Tracy really is amazing at just as a creative, having produced that volume of material. That takes time. And so she's been really strategic in her choices and really innovative with how she gets that done. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to have her on. So, Tracy, after a long rambling introduction, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Give us a little bit for people who haven't either read your books or haven't, heard you talk at a writing conference. How did you get into writing?
So I think that I was always a born storyteller. From childhood, I always thought that would be the coolest thing ever would be to be an author. And then, of course, you grow up, and as a teenager, everyone tells you that you have to have a real job.
Mm,
And so I went to college and, of course, graduated in finance and international business because that's what one does if they want to become an author.
yeah.
Um, but I basically, it started out like, I guess, the end of college. I just needed an escape. I found that I needed a creative outlet and started just playing with writing. And I really was quite horrible at it. Chapters and really, um, and then ultimately I just started writing the story that I wanted to read that nobody else was writing for me.
Mm,
But what pushed me to pursue publication was I was working with some young ladies in church, and they were ready to read books that were kind of adult level for the conflict and things like that, but they didn't want the adult content
Mm,
in the negative sense. And so I was like, there's got to be something out there. And I started looking on the shelves, and there really wasn't a lot. Like, especially in the thriller space,
mm,
a lot of times you'll find a bit of language. Sometimes you'll have the on screen or the on page intimacy and such that wouldn't be appropriate for 12 and 13-year-old girls. And so I was like, you know what? If nobody else is going to put it out there in the world, then I'll try. And so that's what really got me started.
wow. I'm glad it got you started. And
Well, thank
viewers,
you.
hopefully, like I'm having an occasional delay with the video here. Hopefully, the sound is still coming through. So, we're gonna just hang tight and we'll keep going. Um, so you started there, and then fast forward, you had a short span of time at the CIA. And I'm always curious when I hear
Mm-hmm.
people that work in the intelligence community. I always ask people, I'm like, so how did that start? Because everybody's story is so different. Did you just wake up one day and be like, you know what? I think I want to work at the CIA or at the FBI or at the NSA or any insert intelligence agency here. How do you get there?
So for me, I actually got recruited out of college. Um, I had, like I said, I did finance and international business, and I did a minor in international relations. I didn't
Mm.
realize that I'd kind of custom tailored my my degree to the CIA. I did have a language as well, and so my husband is from Virginia, Northern Virginia, and we'd come home after we got
Mm.
married during college, and we came home to live with his parents during a summer. And the bishop from our church was the recruiter who
Oh.
happened to come in, and I ran into him, and I was not qualified because they were looking for accountants, and I
Mm.
am not an accountant. I don't like pennies. I like hundreds of thousands. And he asked me, he says, well, are you interviewing? And I said, well, I'm not qualified. I'm supposed to have 15 credits of accounting, and I have 6.
Mm.
He says, no, I have an opening at this particular time. And he told me when to come back. And so I went in and did the interview, and I ended up being one of the 2 they took. And I was actually the one that stuck the longest. Like, the other person only lasted for about 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that's what happened. They literally, I was on the looking for jobs to interview for, and he pulled me right out of it.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. And that's the thing I love is what the everyone's job story is so different, and there's all these different experiences. And the thing that I
mm-hmm.
love about you sharing
Yeah,
that is every writer has different experiences in their life that contribute to what they write, why they write what they write.
yeah.
Um, and so that happened to be one of the things that gives you a viewpoint for a thriller that, other people may not naturally have. Um, for me, like I love to watch spy thrillers. Really enjoyed going to the Spy Museum in the DC area. I've loved that kind of stuff. But you're right, there is a lot of either on screen or on page stuff that I don't always want to have to read or to watch. And that's a
Yeah.
difficult thing if I'm going to try to write it. So that's one reason I love your books. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, as someone who hasn't had that experience in the intelligence world, but I do love to read stories about it and, you know, and write about it. What recommendations do you have if I want to write my own story like that?
So usually what I tell people to do is go straight to the websites of the agencies they're trying to write a character from. Um, CIA.gov is it's actually a great resource not
Hmm.
only for kind of what people do there, because they'll give some basic information, but if you look at like what jobs are they apply, like look at the job postings,
Hmm.
because then you can see what kind of
Mm.
person they want, like what background are they looking for the different jobs, what jobs are they? Most people wouldn't think about you could be a makeup artist at the CIA.
Yeah.
Well, disguises can be a thing. So or computer technician or electrical engineer, or there's a lot of jobs that are are there. Gov, there's a link there to the World Fact Book that the CIA puts out every single year that includes, if you ever do anything internationally, it's
Mm.
a gold mine of information because it tells you like the breakdown of everything, like demographics in every category, religion, age, um, what they do for industry, all these types of things. So I use that a lot
Okay.
because just countries change from year to year. So yeah, but then they also typically have like some type of a public affairs office.
Hmm.
And so police are the same way. A lot of times you can call up one of those people or email them and say, hey, I have a specific question. Um, like I'm actually need to do that again with the CIA because just a lot of things have changed. And so every once in a while I'll call up and say, hey, what are you guys calling this now? Do you
Mm.
call it a green line or do you call it an open line? Do um, what do these things look like in today's world? So you kind of have to know some of the questions to ask because
Okay.
I will tell you the worst thing to do though is to try to get somebody who's former CIA or former FBI or something
Hmm.
and then try to get them to spill all their secrets
Uh,
because you know what's classified at this time. Where if you go directly to the agency, they can be very honest about, well, we can't talk about that, but we can give you this information.
that makes sense.
So, and we
Um,
can give you little general information,
yeah,
but there's a lot we can't say.
yeah. It was it was interesting when I lived back in the DC area for a couple of years, and I was working on one of my novels. Um, I pulled someone aside because when you live in that area, the chances of going to church with someone who works for a named or an unnamed agency is really high. And so I said, "Hey, here's this idea that I have,"
Uh-huh. Oh,
and I'm like,
it
"Does this
it
sound realistic?"
will happen.
And he looked at me and he says,
That's,
"I I can't talk to you about that."
yeah,
It's like I will just tell you
yeah.
beige 42. And then I was asking more questions and he looked at me and I'm like, okay, I won't ask any more questions. And so in the back of my head, I'm
Yeah,
like, either that's his standard answer or I'm onto something. And I like to think I was onto something, but it's probably just his standard answer. So he doesn't have to answer those conversations or those questions. So it's been really, really interesting. As a thriller writer, especially when you're in this world, what's one of the biggest challenges for you?
um, I think probably because I've written so many books, is trying to come up with
Mm.
new ways of creating conflict. I mean, I joke about the fact that I have a bomb problem. That anytime I don't know what to do, it's like, well, we'll find a bomb. Let's just go see
Yeah.
if we can find a bomb somewhere, And it's just, or all of a sudden people are armed or whatever, um, and usually you can pull a little bit from real life, but it is a challenge to make. You don't want readers to ever feel like they're reading the same story again by this,
Mm.
especially by the same author.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest challenge for me at this point.
Yeah. And with as many books, there's a lot of books in the Saint Squad um, series,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been interesting to watch how you keep it going. Um, to see, I mean, there's things that you would see in any book in a series that fits in a certain genre, but okay, it's like, okay, what's the new twist going to be in
Mm-hmm.
this one? It's like, oh, didn't see that coming. That one's really interesting how they, introduced, how the tension or the conflict is here, and it's like, oh, okay, that's a great connection back to like 3 books ago where this happened. Now we're getting this back in,
Right.
and so it's been, it's just fun to read. So I'm going to take a little bit of a shift here and put on kind of your writing coach hat. We've talked a little bit about that. Uh, I've been to several of your classes, and one of the ones that actually I found really interesting. I'm going to lay this scenario out, and then I'll have you put that coaching hat on and give some advice here. But you, I think, introduce yourself as a notorious pantser, just going where the story takes you, flying by the
Uh-huh.
seat of your pants. And Sarah Eden, who you were teaching with, is a notorious plotter. And what was
Yes.
really interesting in this is you both shared the moment where you basically traded hats to where there's a story where you plotted out everything and Sarah didn't at
Hmm.
all. And so it was really interesting to see how that in that moment that worked really, really well for both of you. Um, and I always hear people talk about that. Okay, I've got this story. You know, how do I begin? Do I write an outline? Do I just go? Because some writers I know, they're like, I don't want the outline because then I don't know what to do if I had the outline.
Right.
Um, for a beginning writer, and I would say this kind of will cross the board for just creators in general. When you're at the beginning of the project, what advice do you have for them with how to get started?
I think for me, I always start wherever I'm most interested. Um, like right now, I'm getting ready. I have a couple of books I need to wrap up before I can move on to the next project. But of course, I'm already trying to cheat on the current ones and
Mhm.
move on to the next one. Um, and so I keep having like these little ideas and scenes of, oh, this would be kind of a fun interaction. It might just be like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue. And
Mhm.
so I'll just write them down. Even though I need to go back to my other project, I'm like, well, I'll just put that in. And I don't know if I'll use it in the way I write it, but at least the idea is still
Mm.
there. Um, but I think the most important thing for especially beginning writer is to recognize that you can get all the advice in the world from people, but if it doesn't work for you, it's bad advice.
Mm.
You have to go with what works for you. Is, you know, like you said, Sarah and I, when I'm writing a novel, I have a character and a keyboard, and that's where I start. I typically have very little beyond that.
Yeah.
Sarah has interviews with her characters. She has a psychological profile. She has like color coded spreadsheets. It's beautiful. I look at them like, this must be so lovely. But then the idea of sitting down and writing out an outline or plotting in any way brings out the impatience in me like nothing else does. But when I
Oh
go
yeah.
and try to write a screenplay, I feel like I have to have it kind of
Mm.
figured out before I can start. And Sarah, when she writes a screenplay, flips the other direction and doesn't really. She has to, a lot of just.
Oh, it froze for a second, but you're back.
Okay, I was saying when Sarah and I are we got together a week or two ago when we just did like a little writing retreat with Sean Bassey. And at one point I said, okay, you guys, I just don't know what's going to happen. This is driving me nuts. And so I kind of talked out something I was going to try to do. And Sarah's like, I'm just doing the mind blown again. Like, how does your brain work like this? I'm like, I see what you're doing, but I don't know how you could have gone through the patience, being so tedious of writing out everything for you. And so we've just sprint in the writing. Sarah may come up with 1,500 words and I might get 500,
Mm.
and it's like, but we both move forward in our projects. So we want everyone who's working together to feel good about what they did, not like, oh man, I'll never be as fast as Sarah and
Yeah.
Eden. It's like, no, Sarah wants you to be successful too. So I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing is just recognizing that what's working for you is what you want to stick with, and also knowing that the process may change as your process changes.
Yeah. And that's such great advice because I think I started originally as going to outline everything. I had a whole book where I outlined the whole thing. And when I got done, like I knew the whole story, but I'm like, I'm kind of not excited to go write this now. And then
Yeah,
I shifted back a little bit to where I'm like, okay, I know if I have these main things enough to get me from point A to point B, then I'll outline just to get me the next few steps, just to get me, okay, I can write to that
right.
point. Now I got to figure out the next. And that's more, I've kind of done this hybrid because it's a little bit more exciting. Where I'm like, okay, I'm discovering, I kind of know where I need to go. I know by the end of the scene, they have to be here. I don't know
Yeah,
exactly how they'll get there, uh, but that makes it a little bit more exciting. I think that advice of pick what works for you. And then if it's no matter how good the advice is, if it doesn't work for you, it's bad advice. Um, and I think that's good advice.
well, thank you.
Um, and again, listeners, thanks for hanging in with us. When this plays back, hopefully the sound is clear all the way. But yeah, normally we don't have technology difficulties, but today for some reason we are. Um, but yeah, we talked about kind of how you got started. We talked about the books you've written. We talked about just some advice for beginning writers. One thing I love to talk with every, you know, creator that I talk to is just this idea of, you know, what's this concept of the pivot and what are some pivot moments in your life that have happened that have gotten you to where you are right now?
Boy, that's hard. Um, I mean, I think, it's all of a lot of things were just your major decisions of, where do you go to college? Who do you marry? Where do you want to live? Where do you want
Hmm.
to work? Um, but I think for me, it was, obviously working for the CI was huge because where I went to college for me was my dad had gone to University of Arizona. My mom had gone to Arizona State. Those are two big rivals. I did not
Hmm.
want to cause more, and my parents had divorced when I was in high school or before I got to high school. So like did not want to choose on that. And I'd fallen in love with BYU when I went up for a youth program. And so that was probably a big pivot moment is just being on campus and seeing this, what I thought was very green and lush and everything. And of course, now I live in Virginia and it's like, that was actually desert. Um, but to compare to Phoenix,
Yeah.
it was very
Yeah.
green. Um, but just that's where I met my husband. That's where I, was recruited into the CIA. And then just like I look at a lot of things that are really in history books now. I
Mm.
mean, I was in the CIA when the Oklahoma City bombing happened,
Yeah.
when during the first Gulf War. I was there for the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Wow.
So started right before that went down. So I was literally the breakup of the Soviet Union was my time at the agency, and so this is something that's now literally in history books. And I remember I, for Oklahoma City bombing, it didn't have anything to do with the CIA. That was a domestic terrorist attack.
Mm.
But I remember all of us standing in, they had like this television screen near the front. They pulled it out of the little conference rooms into this big open bay where all of our cubicles were so that we could all see what was going on. And I remember the feeling looking at everyone, and all of us had this same expression on our face of, what did we miss?
Mm.
And I remember so distinctly thinking, all of these people come into this to work every day, and a lot of it's tedious work, quite honestly. You're going through paperwork and digging through information.
Hmm.
Um, and then we know that if we miss a tidbit, something like that could happen.
Mm.
But another thing that really hit me hard was the first intel. So I left the agency in December of 1995.
Hmm.
The first intel dropped for 9 that happened on the 9/11 attack in 96.
Oh.
And so that's always been one of those things where one of my jobs was to get other agencies to work together.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was obviously it didn't work. So,
Mm.
you always wonder, you know that things happen for a reason, but you always have that, you know, that idea of, wait, this could have been life or death. And so I have had people in my regular world of like, Traci, this is not life or death. Because in the CI, you have like, you have your plan A and your plan B and your plan C and your plan D. And then if this happens, then you've got to have E, F, and G.
Yeah.
And so because it's so important, you always have all these backup plans.
Yeah.
And so it drives people nuts. A lot of times I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to have, if this doesn't happen, then we're going to do it this way. And so that's just kind of how my brain works
Yeah.
because that's where you've been trained.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Complete side note, I got the help to kind of build an online course for BYU Idaho years ago that it was on Pakistan. It's called Global Hotspots Pakistan. And
oh, yeah.
one of
Yep.
the books that teachers read who are going to be teaching the class is called The Secret History of the CIA in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
Super fascinating book. Um, but the thing that was really interesting, and as you were just talking about, your time, it's really interesting just to see how long it takes sometimes to figure out information because things are just
Yeah.
over time. It's like things that we see happening now, they didn't just start yesterday. They started
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and so That's actually one advice I would give writers is, especially if you're going into this world, is a lot of the thing, as you're building your characters, they will have been thinking about some of this stuff for years and years, and there's plans that
Yeah.
have been in place for a while. Um,
Yeah, I think especially when you're looking at your villains, that's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of beginning writers make is that the
mhm,
villain is just a cartoon. You know,
mhm,
they're very cartoonish as far as they're just bad.
yeah,
It's like, well, they got bad for a reason, and they're the hero of their own story. So why are they doing what they're doing? Um, but also, like some of the hatred and the violence that happens, especially like in the Middle East and some of those
mm,
types of countries, we truly can't understand it as Westerners. Like it is ingrained through hundreds of years. You know, it's been passed down, and so it just simply we. It's not something where you can just talk somebody this some sense into somebody. This is we're dealing with cultures that we truly don't completely understand.
yeah.
So
And that's a plug I would actually make for any writer, and especially if you're going to be doing things that involve different cultures, is learn a little bit about anthropology. I totally
yeah,
am gonna forget the name of the book. I did an anthropology course, but it was really interesting because and I've interviewed that professor. It was Liz several episodes ago, but she talks about just different things writers need to think about. They like think like an anthropologist, because you need to look at for your wherever your
yeah,
character's from, you got to think like you need to understand that culture where they're coming from. You need to be able to look through that lens because 99% of the time it's going to be different than yours. And so they're going to respond to things in a way that you wouldn't have even naturally thought of. And so I think that's what you had mentioned of, that just thinking of your villain, your characters is not just as this cartoon that happened, but there's something that's happened
right,
before page one that got them to where they're at.
right. And we want to use a lot of different, you want to be surprised at who it is. We don't want it to just always be a Middle Eastern terrorist. I
Yeah,
mean, I've got a Pakistani family living next door to me. They're delightful. It's like,
yeah,
so you want to show the good and the bad in all cultures, or at least show that there's a lens that is going to show a refraction of both sides of that world.
yeah. That's very true. Well, Tracy, I'm watching my timer here and it came up and it looks like our time is almost up. So I wanted to give you just another chance to share any kind of parting advice with creatives, but also just talk about what's next for you.
So what's next for me as far as coming out? I have, let's see, I have so many books, you guys. So Victim Number 8 will be my next one, which is the second of my Luke Steele novels. And then I have another Guardian book coming out in February because Victim Number 8 and actually the paperback for Hometown Vendetta also comes out. Those are both October. Um, the Guardian will be in the cover reveal, I think, and the title will be coming out in October. They'll announce that. And then April, I will have one called Staged Evidence, which is my second one with my Pen and Dagger series. So that one follows novel threat. So, and I was saying, I think as far as advice, is just, be true to what you want to write and who you are. There's always going to be somebody who's more successful than we are. And it's a lot more fun to cheer for everybody's successes and not worry about how they compare to our own.
Mm, that's very true. That's great advice. Well, thank you again, Tracy, for being on the show, and everyone, stay tuned to the next episode.
Thanks.